Hello, my fellow music lovers. I'm Allison Hagendorf, and welcome to the show. This is where we celebrate the universal love of music and the rock and roll spirit that lives in each of us. My guest today is alternative rock god, the Smashing Pumpkins frontman and friend of mine, Billy Corgan. I have always been a fan of Billy's and the Smashing Pumpkins for decades, and it is always so special for me anytime we hang out. But to have such an in-depth sit-down and heart-to-heart is truly wonderful. We talk all about the new album, ATUM, the magic that keeps the Smashing Pumpkins together and so prolific after all these years, the importance of celebrating younger superstars like Willow and YUNGBLUD, the impact of Kurt Cobain's death, and how becoming a father is his proudest legacy. And stay tuned after the interview for my sound advice. New music you need to know. It all starts now. I am so happy you're here.
Thank you.
This is a gift for me. Thank you.
What's weird to me is, I watch your show and I wondered and we're in the middle of the desert. This is wild. How do you get all the way out here?
We are. I know, it's true.
It's like you need like a Mars rover. Yeah, this is wild.
Exactly.
I had to go through like these big gates that said AH with but they like in flames. And
yeah, but it was worth it.
I'm with you. Of course it's worth it.
Oh, thank you. I haven't seen you since I had the honor of introducing you during your handprint
and you
ceremony.
were with child.
I was very pregnant.
And it was very hot that day.
It was.
And I remember thinking, I don't know if this is right. She's out there sweating with the kid and kid to be, obviously.
Yes.
And but thank you for that. We were so happy to share that moment with you.
You know that you and Kiss are the only two bands who received that honor?
Yeah. And do you mind a little story?
Are you kidding? Bring on all the stories.
Okay. So, we heard about it and they're doing this thing. And I thought it was going to be like a thing like you do the ceremony, but they don't put it in the ground. They just kind of give it to you. Like,
right.
We're honoring you with this process, but you don't get to hang here. And then somebody said to me when I was there that day with you, like, no, it's real. And I'm like, what do you mean it's real? Like down there with Carole Lombard and Clark Gable? Because I'm a huge Hollywood,
right,
particularly 30s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So a lot of my heroes are down in that. So I was like, then I got really freaked out. And then Chloe, my partner, who you know, Chloe got mad at me because her father wanted to come. And I said, oh, he shouldn't come out from New York for this. It's a cool thing, but it's not that big a deal. And then I was like, oh my God, it's really a big deal.
You didn't realize you were literally going to be putting your handprints in front of everyone. Okay.
Sorry to repeat. I thought you would do the ceremony, you get the press thing and answer a couple questions, whatever. But then I thought they weren't actually going to put it in the ground.
Yeah.
It's not like, here's your ceremonial handprint thing, thanks. And then next week it's, I don't know, Fall Out Boy. You know what I mean? Like, it's all good. You know what I mean? Speaking of Chicago.
Right, yes.
I didn't know it was like, no, you're going to be in there with Kiss and Carole Lombard and Joan Crawford and, William Powell. And I was like, then I got really freaked out.
Yeah, that was really special. What a huge compliment. It really was.
So I take some ownership of your child now because that day changed you.
It did. And also there's another moment when I was pregnant with Cole, my other son. I had come to see you on tour, and as you finished your set, I was standing on the side of the stage, and literally I was going to give you your space so you can like cool off and have some water.
I'm not that guy.
You went straight over to me and like greeted my pregnant belly. And I was like, this unborn child has just been like knighted by Billy Corgan.
Well, it's the goth, It's like there's a sort of a goth ray that we can send out. It's a life of happiness, but it's like an indoctrination into this cult.
It really was pretty special. And his name is Cole Hendricks. I know you're a big Hendrix fan. So
yes.
This whole like beautiful musical.
I hate to, I hate when people give away the end of the movie, but pretty soon he'll start listening like Sisters of Mercy.
Oh yeah.
And Crime in the City Solution, if you want to get real deep.
Yes.
And you'll be like, but Mom's a rocker, and be like, Mom, this is my path. This is my journey. You're going to have to respect that.
I know. It's true. It's true. I try to introduce I do good parenting. He loves David Bowie. He was David Bowie for Halloween already.
Good start.
It's a strong start.
Yeah. What was he like? The Thin White Duke? Was he...
Well, Let's Dance is his favorite song.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to show you the pictures.
I actually had an in-depth conversation once with David about the making of that record.
Really?
Yeah.
Look, what was that like for you? Because I know that David, of course, is one of your biggest idols.
I mean, are you kidding? It was interesting because David, this is my quick psychological sketch. David was a very shy person, I think. And he was used to being David Bowie, duh. So, but sometimes people like that, there's the sort of like, they can put the flashlight on, like, hey, great, David Bowie. But the real person's still kind of back in there. Once you got past, hey, it's David Bowie, and I was around him enough times, you realize the real David Bowie was kind of shy and a bit bookish, and I'm not saying different, just lights on, maybe lights not as bright.
Yeah.
Because he was super charismatic. Are you kidding? When he'd hit that smile and go into David Bowie mode, hello, it's like, I get to play rock star. There's like a real star. And by the way, not just a rock star, like a star. Like a megawatt.
Yes.
80,000 people in a stadium. That's a different class of dude or star. I don't want to gender it because obviously there's huge female stars as well. So it was cool to get to know him as a person. And yeah. And I haven't given the details of this, but I know you well enough. I'll at least give you this teaser. Yeah. It happens to me occasionally that after people pass and go to the other side, they visit me in my dreams. And my dreams, when that happens, are totally different than, say, a normal dream. It's hard to explain, but I'm like, where am I? It's almost like being in a totally different reality. Everything has substance, and everything is highly designed. And so about a month after David passed, he came and visited me in one of those dreams, and I was with him for maybe 10 minutes in the dream.
Wow. And
it was wild. I'll tell the story some point, probably in a book, but it was cool because I felt like, he's letting me know he's okay. But it wasn't just like I'm okay. He wanted to show me stuff. Like, it was super sci-fi, like David would.
Yeah.
So if that's a product of my imagination, which is quite vivid, I'll take it either way because it made me feel at peace. So who knows? When you get into that stuff, there's no answer. But I love, and I get a bit bitter about it. And this is just me being a fan and a friend. We were both signed to Virgin Records in the 90s. Nancy Berry, if you know Nancy at all, was a big proponent of David. And she would tell me stories, because corporate times in the 90s, big megalith corporation. And she would go in and just literally be like, okay, David's putting on a new record. And the staff would be like filing their nails. And, and they would say stuff to her. Like, no one cares about David Bowie anymore. Like, why do we have to do this? It's your passion project. And
wow.
And I would hear those stories while it was happening. And obviously the Pumpkins were up here, And I don't mean that as any sort of supremacy. I mean that just as like, we were having a good run. And I would hear those stories and I'd be like, oh my God. So I went out of my way to try to understand his politic at the time, to understand what was going on with the label at the time. I knew some inside baseball that obviously was very proprietary to the company. And where am I going with this? It just really pained me.
Yeah, of course.
And of course I would mention him in interviews. I would try to do what little I could do. And of course I was lucky enough to play his 50th birthday party on his invitation, which was like one of the all-time honors of my life. Ugh. Robert Smith was there, and Black Francis was there, and Thurston from Sonic Youth. It was a really cool, and there's a beautiful picture if anybody's ever seen it where they put everybody together and kind of took the group picture of the event, which I cherish. But then for some reason, and because it was when you were around David, it was definitely David's show.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm going to be like, I want to do it my way, like I normally would be. Anyway, so somebody's like, something's happening, and I'm not really sure what's happening, so I don't know where to stand. And next thing I know, somebody pushes me, and now I'm in a photo, and it's me, Lou Reed, Robert Smith, and David, because somebody wanted that shot. Now, that's the shot for me. Right. Are you kidding me? I mean, 3 of my heroes, knew them all a little bit personally, some more than others, but it's like, that shot right there, I mean, you want to fanboy out.
Are those the moments that you're like, okay, I made it? Like, what is going through your mind in that moment?
It's a combination of things because And this goes back to what I'm telling you about David. I'm a person who feels like if you enter this crazy world of music on the professional side, my father, was a professional, but he just played gigs. But this side, the recording and all the media, if you come in and let's say you're not even a Lou Reed fan, if you don't know who Lou Reed is and you don't respect the game,
right?
I'm sorry, you're a fucking asshole. You're a fucking asshole, and I've met plenty. And I even hate it when I would do stuff like that, where I would think like, oh, I don't care about him or her. That's not my gimmick. Over time, I learned to appreciate. I think it was probably because of when the pop stars came in hard in the late 90s, early 2000s. It took me a while to understand, like, if you're Christina Aguilera or Britney, the boy bands, that's something.
Yeah.
You don't have to like it, but you got to respect it. So that I had to evolve over that. So when you're standing there, back to your question, when you're standing there with three people that you truly have listened to, learned from, respect, and you're like, how am I in this shot? Now I've proven my mettle over time, but in that moment, you're like, I'm pretty lucky because this is some rare company, and I know how rare it is. I don't need some jerk in Brooklyn who writes for some website to tell me. I know, right? That's my world.
I'm sort of having that moment right now sitting here with you because you're that to me. Seriously,
well, thank
Billy,
you.
I'm serious. You are one of my favorites artists, and I'm not a musician. I'm not a musician.
You have a musician's heart, though.
I have a musician's heart, and you have provided the soundtrack, and not just in the 90s.
Yeah.
I've been a fan the whole way.
Yes, you have.
And I was fortunate to see you earlier this week celebrating Autumn. The third act is finally out.
Can you believe it?
You have been working towards this for years, this rock opera, this 33-song body of work. Now that it's out, how do you feel?
Well, I've made a good career out of bitterness. I go back to a meeting. James had rejoined the band, as some people would know. James and I didn't speak, much less have an email, for 16 or so years. A lot of animosity there. So once we resolved all that, and that's held, like now we're 5+ years into a renaissance of the band. I go back to a meeting that we had when it was just the OG, right?
Yeah.
Me, Jimmy, and James. And here we are having a nice, expensive meal. And I go, I got this idea. And da-da-da-da-da-da. And they look at me like, what? Because in my mind, hey, man, the gang's back together.
Right.
Let's go. Hit the gas. 1,000 miles an hour. And they're like, are you insane?
Right.
Yes, but...
But that's irrelevant.
Yeah. No, but in a weird way, because I think what happened, and things tend to work for a reason. I think if we made Autumn then, it wouldn't be the record that it is now. And I mean in terms of strength. It would have had some different points. But like even the fact that I wrote a record about AI and transhumanism and robotics, and, I started writing that 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And now every day it's like AI this, AI this. Oh my God. And then the other, if you don't mind another quick story, I was talking about AI with my partner Chloe the other night, and she's like, and I said something negative. She goes, I'm going to do Chloe imitation. What do you mean? I use AI every day now. I'm like, you do? She goes, I use it to write my business emails. And she starts showing me all this, and I had no idea.
Wow.
So to her,
Chloe using it.
Chloe has some dyslexia, ADD type stuff, as is common in her generation. Might have something to do with the internet. That's my point of view.
Yeah.
But point is for her to be able to ask something to do something, and it all comes out and it sounds, because she always says, I can't do it like you do, where you can just talk. That's a skill that you have. I don't have that. So for me, this is a blessing because I'm a mama like you. And I doing all this stuff over there. I don't have the hour to write the perfect email anymore. I just,
That's interesting. She uses that.
Oh, yeah. She's all about it.
Have you been seeing the AI covers that are happening? Well, they'll take like Kurt Cobain doing a Radiohead song.
No, somebody did it. Kurt doing a Today by the Pumpkins.
Oh,
Somebody
wow.
sent that to me and I was like, I'm not going there. This is just...
Like, how does that make you feel when you see that?
I think it's all... I think that part's fun.
Mm-hmm.
I think the dark part is, and maybe there's a bit of sorrow in it, maybe I'm projecting. If I was 15 years old now and I wrote my first 2 songs and everybody did what they did to me, which was like, sounds like Pink Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, I'm 15. I'm scared. I'm trying. I have this feeling. Okay. And now I look over here when I'm not looking at porn or whatever else or AI porn, right? Oh, by the way, if I feed these 3 chords or this feeling I have into this thing, it's going to spit out a far more sophisticated version of what I'm capable of. And oh, by the way, I really like it. And now that I hear that, I change this one thing and then I play for my friends like, oh, that's really good, bro. Sounds like Radiohead. Oh, good. Because I don't want to sing like Pink Floyd. I sound like Pink Floyd. I want to sound like Radiohead. That sounds more like what I'm going for. That kid's never going to learn how to write the way I did. And I'm not saying my version's better, but you learn a lot about yourself. That part makes me sad because why wouldn't that kid press that button if it's there? And look, streaming services are already using AI-generated music for profitability. Okay. There's going to be, and there have been for years in Japan, there are AI-generated artists where there's not even a real person and thousands of people go watch an anime character do songs. It's over. I mean, now we're going to have almost like a third cottage industry of AI-produced product. And the minute they start getting on the charts, it's over. Because you have to deal with a psychotic person like me versus like, hey, Bob, if you want to go to the, what's the place on the Ivy,
Yeah.
You want to go to the Ivy for lunch? Hold on, let me finish writing this AI song, or hold on, Billy Corgan line 2. Oh God,
Well, one is the end product and one is the artist with the journey. They're 2 different things. One's like being handed a superhero power. And it's like you kind of get to skip all of the grueling work and
I'm sorry.
They're just different things.
I have a lot of faith in humanity, but I don't have that kind of faith. I just don't see those artists of the next generation or this current generation going through all the paces that you need to go through, all the insecurity, all the rejection, right? And you interview artists all the time. Mm-hmm. What do they talk about? Oh my God, my head is done in by 8,000 things.
Right.
And you're usually talking to the people that have been successful. Try talking to the people who haven't been successful, like my father. Right. They're damaged because they've been told, sorry, you just don't get to join the fun party over here, So I think that's going to be tough, and maybe it'll be like one of those things like you almost have to like look for some special label or something. Like it'll tell you like Joe or Mary wrote this song.
Well, that's why so many artists are not even doing bands because you have to deal with band dynamics. Isn't it much easier to do music on your own, But it's the band dynamics that makes the band. I mean, you, James, and Jimmy, think about...
Does it? As Darcy Resky used to say, being in a band is like being married to 3 people you don't like.
Right. It is. It's a complex...
It's a very
familial
complex,
dynamic.
And you've had more access to it than most. You see those dynamics behind the scenes. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because all you need to know, if anybody's listening, is look at your own family.
Right.
Everybody loves Uncle Bob, but are you inviting him over for Thanksgiving? You got to think about that.
Right.
Because Uncle Bob likes to drink, and by the time you're cleaning up the turkey, here comes Uncle Bob, and
it's the good with the bad.
That's a band.
What do you think it is that's so special about you, Jimmy, and James? I mean, obviously, there's something very magical there after decades, and now you're putting out some of your greatest work together, the biggest tours.
Yeah. Rick Rubin said when James came back to the band, and we did that first thing with Rick, he said, James softens your metal, meaning I'm more of a riffer, and James has a way of kind of creating a psychedelia over the top. As soon as James came back, it was like, oh yeah, there's that thing, that weird thing that happens. It's the way we play together. Where did that start? In the bedroom that my dad used to deal drugs out of. James and I learned how to play this particular way together, and that's the way we both play. So when he's standing there, we automatically go into that thing. Jimmy, I mean, are you kidding me? Jimmy came in, on a early summer's day, stonewashed jeans, pink t-shirt, mullet haircut, yellow drum kit, driving a 280Z. And the three goths in us looked and thought, oh my God, what is this? Here's the real skinny on Jimmy. Jimmy went to school and was like doing a college marching band. So he had to learn all the crazy, all that. Then I think probably before that, he played in a famous polka band.
That's incredible.
And there is a clip, somebody has it, of Jimmy at like 15 playing boom ba on
I did not know this.
Local TV with like a barbershop quartet. Boom, but he's still got the mullet.
Jimmy.
And what's amazing about Jimmy is at 15 he still looks the same
exactly
age at 15.
Same, yeah.
Somehow he looks like he's still 40. Yeah. Like now he's going towards 16. He still looks like he's 40. Somehow he's always looked 40.
It's the median. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I met Jimmy, he was playing in basically a wedding band. I was actually walking. He invited me to some street fair as we have in Chicago, and it was a beautiful day. And I was walking with my future ex-wife, and we walked up, and the band was playing "Green-Eyed Lady." If you remember that song.
Oh wow, yeah.
Green-eyed lady, fashion lady.
Yep.
And all I heard was boom, cha, boom, and I was like, wow, that guy can play. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That was the first moment. Like, he could play the drums. A lot of people can play the drums. A lot of people can play the guitar. I heard that thing that sells a lot of records eventually.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded like a recording, but live. And I was like, how does he do that? Because I never heard that from a drummer that I knew.
Right.
It was always some guy in Rush. So as soon as we figured out, and it started with like, oh, you like Rush? Yeah. I'm like, it's like a litmus test for musicians.
Yeah, of course.
Like, can you play the middle section in Tom Sawyer? And Jimmy's like, he plays it while he's looking at the newspaper. He had integrated Ian Pace, John Bonham. At that point, he was 23, 24? He had them all down. All of them.
That's incredible.
Billy Cott, all the best, like the drummers. Bozio, all of them. He could do all that stuff. It was like, who are you? Because Jimmy was from Joliet, and he talked like he was from Joliet. You know, not somebody you associate as like with a deeper aesthetic.
Right.
And we were all snobby, you know? So we had that. And I was like, oh my God, I found like the needle in a million haystacks. Like, who is this guy? And the tension point was the other two, unnamed, wanted him gone because he didn't look the part.
That mullet.
And didn't sound the part. And was a different type of personality. He wasn't an alt guy. He'd never heard Bauhaus. He'd never heard The Cure.
He didn't know The Cure.
He didn't know any of it. If you'd say, I don't know, Love and Rockets, he'd be like, what? Huh?
Right.
He knew more like, so we would talk about Gene Krupa or I'd try to find some common language.
Yes.
So I knew enough about like Benny Goodman to say, that Krupa beat. So you think of Jimmy's Tom. He's doing Gene Krupa.
That's really cool, though.
So that we had that.
So
like,
you had that connection.
Oh, you can do that because we didn't want to, especially because we were kind of gothy. That we didn't like. I didn't want him to sound like play like Neil Peart on the goth song,
right?
But Gene Krupa on the goth song. Okay, now you're kind of in the Cure territory.
Yes, that's acceptable.
Okay, but now we're a heavier Cure. Now you're like, okay. And then you
can digest that.
Then you hear Stephen Perkins. And you say, oh, that works. I just had a conversation with Stephen Perkins in Australia the other day. Right now, by the way, the band is out with Josh Klinghoffer playing guitar. They are killing it. It's probably the best I've heard Jane's sound in a long time. And it's no slight on Dave, because Dave Navarro, longtime friend, love Dave. But Dave's not there right now. Jane's is on fire right now. So, but I was talking about Stephen about, those beautiful Jane's arrangements where they just kind of wind and they're like dreamy drug trips. And I said, yeah, we stole that from you. I mean, like, we were like, we'll take that too. So imagine that and the Cure and the drumming, and it's all of a sudden it's like this whole world opens up, but it's all because of Jimmy.
Oh, that's
Jimmy
really cool.
takes you there. Because if you dream it, it's like, hey, let's play a super aggressive Ministry style beat that Al Jorgensen would program in a drum machine.
Right.
And Jimmy's like, okay.
He was like the secret weapon.
Yeah. Let's do ELO 74 Strange Magic. Okay. it was like you couldn't stump him. Remember that game on Johnny Carson or like stump the guy?
Oh, yes, of course.
You couldn't stump the drummer.
Stump him.
You couldn't stump the drummer.
He was so versatile.
Oh my God. Now it's easy to say he's one of the greatest rock drummers of all time. And, you know, I think he's been Modern Drummer of the Year 4 times. I mean, like real accomplishments.
Yeah.
And drum people know what I'm talking about. Like you're rated up there with the real greats.
Right.
At this point, I'm in a rehearsal space, which is also a place that the guy who was a friend of my dad's was selling drugs and illegal Chicago Bears merchandise out the back door. That's our rehearsal space. And he's just some guy with a mullet. And the other 2 band members are trying to get rid of him. And I'm like, I don't think we're going to find this again in Chicago, much less LA. Like I knew enough. And my father, last part of the story, my father saw us play one of the early gigs and he kind of pulled me aside and said, I don't care what you do with the other 2. Don't lose the fucking drummer.
Wow.
Whatever you do not lose the drummer.
That was probably the best advice that he gave you.
That was my father's way of saying, if you're going to get anywhere in this life, you better hang on to that guy by his ankles.
Wow.
And I did. Because it wasn't easy. Because Jimmy had his issues.
Yes.
And would disappear. And where's Jimmy? That became that. There was that game. And we'd call Jimmy's mom at home. Do you know where Jimmy is? I haven't seen him for 2 weeks. And you know he's standing right there.
Oh.
It's like, I'm going to kill you. Somehow we navigated all that. So when you put it all back together, here we are. Great. Let's jump back into the prog. And they look at me like, no, maybe not. So here's Adam 4 or 5 years later, because I was stubborn enough to say, I'm doing it with or without you. And they're like, okay.
But you have to give them credit. They were open to it. And now it's born and it's out. And it's pretty special. And I think it's this album, which is your 12th album, which is so wild to think about. It really is one of maybe your most diverse albums. Of course, we have the storytelling aspect of it, but even sonically, I know it's more guitar driven, than Sear, but like you'll have like Harmageddon, which is like beautiful metal, into Fireflies, which by the way is now one of my new favorite songs. And then you have like Intergalactic, which of course like this cool drum journey. You get to
definitely like some ministry in there at the end.
Yes, totally. But I'm loving this body of work. And I think the band has always been unique because you see all those influences. I mean, the band, you had classic rock, then you had like new wave, you had so many different sides of it. And I think that Autumn really does show all the different sides. Also like a very experimental aspect to it too.
Yeah. I think the contrivance of the story, because the character has to look back at some point and deal with what's happened to him, and then obviously what's happening in the future, because that's sort of where the story goes. It allowed me this weird moment for the first time in my life to say, it's okay to live in the past, the present, and the future at the same time. Where every album before, I always felt like I had to make a choice. Because that's just the way the music business tends to work. Like, well, what are you saying? So it was like, okay, it's okay to have one song sound like Siamese Dream, and it's okay to have a song that doesn't sound like any album you've made, and another song to sound like Oceania, another song to sound like Adore. It's okay. As long as the story kind of holds it all together, the music will hold together. And over time, then that became its own kind of thing, like a weird movie that if you cut it just right, the disparity between the things kind of seems to be okay. It balances out. But it took time. I mean, I work sequentially every time. So imagine I would start the first song, work on that, go to the next one, and then start over. So by the time I would get back to the first one, it had been like 6 weeks. So I was like, how does this song go? And start over. So every time I went through the cycle, it would get shorter. So now it's 3 weeks. Now it's 2 weeks. And over time, it just kind of took on its own wave. It was wild. And even now I listen to it, and I hear songs promoting it. And I'm like, I don't really even know what's happening there. I mean, I remember making it, but I couldn't tell you how I got there because it's so much journey. It'd be like, have you ever had that where you like went on a vacation and somebody said, how was your vacation? Oh, we did this and we did this and this. And somebody's like, well, what's this picture? Oh yeah, we went to that zoo too. That's how I feel. It's like, oh, that's what the day we went to the zoo too. Like, oh yeah, that too. So I think when you hear that diversity, that's part of it. I got so lost in it that I would even forget where I was on the timeline.
Wow. And the cool thing about it too is that you've had so much success at radio.
Hello.
I mean, Beguiled, first of all, made such a splash. And then now you have simultaneously Spellbinding and Empires at different formats. Both were #1 most added. I mean, how does that feel? That
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I'll try to be quick because it's a really, really long story. From 1992, but maybe one, to 2000, the Smashing Pumpkins were continually on the radio. I had my wars with radio programmers. But when all was said and done, I think it might have been Cashbox. It was one of those industry mags, wrote and said the Pumpkins were the #1 most played band in the alt format in the 90s.
Wow.
And as I always like to say, because I think it's important to point out, if Kurt had stuck around, we might have lost that fight. But it is what it is. So we literally got played the most of any alt band in the 90s. We won that.
That's unbelievable.
War race. So you think, right, going into the 2000s, we broke up the band, now I'm in Zwan or whatever solo. You think, I know all these people, and pick your point on the timeline. Tan in a record, doesn't sound like the Pumpkins. Okay, next album. Sounds a little too much like the old Pumpkins. Okay, hand in another record.
God.
It's a good song. Don't get me wrong. It's a great single. It just doesn't really work with our format right now. We're playing a lot of people in their basement with laptops and funny mustaches and a lot of reverb. So this thing you're doing right now doesn't really fit in. Next album. So for some reason, after this, since we brought the band back, I go back to Zwan, obviously. So you're talking about a 20+ year period where there was some success, but it never felt like, okay, you're back in the game. So imagine I had 10 years of you're in the game, you're always in the conversation.
You're at the top of the game.
God bless you. And then you had, 20 years where it was like always this thing where you felt like you were like tapping on the glass, and depending on who was standing there, you were not welcome. Oh, no, you're welcome when we need something from you. And then now we don't need you. And it was like, and then you start thinking, okay, I got to get out of here.
Yes.
I even made a record, not to belabor the point, Oceania. I was the only original member in the band. Jeff was in the band, who's obviously still in the Pumpkins. I think the record came out 2011, 2012. I went in and I said, everybody around me, including the management at the time, I said, I'm just going to make a great album, and I'm not even going to think about the radio at all. I need to just make a great album.
For yourself.
For myself. Everybody around me agreed, this is a really strong record. And even Pumpkins fans who had a problem with the fact that I was the only original member at the time now really like the record for some reason. Great. Hand in the record. Here it comes. I'm in a perfect place. I don't need to read record reviews. I'm good. I've made a good album. I feel good about myself. I've had a lot of mental health issues. I didn't kill myself that year, so everything's just fine. Here comes the manager. Hey, there's some interest from radio. Okay, but I didn't make any singles. Well, they really like this one song, which at the time was called The Celestials. Okay, but if I'd made it as a single, I wouldn't have made it this way.
Right.
Well, that's funny you mentioned that, because it did come up. They think the intro's too long.
Here it comes.
And to quote Chicago, no shit, Sherlock.
Right.
Because I would have fixed that in the making if I was thinking of it as a single, but I didn't think of it as a single, so I didn't make it that way because I just made it the way I fucking wanted it.
Right.
So now I'm back in the fucking thing of like, a strength is a weakness. And that's the music business in a nutshell. A weakness is a strength, and a strength is weakness, and up is down. And, someday they want you, and someday, and you're like, you just can't follow. This is why people go insane.
Yes.
And I'm actually in a mentally healthy, stable place. It's like, I'm cool. If nobody wants to listen, I'm good. I'm just a happy guy over here, as happy as I can be. And here we are back in the thing.
Yeah.
And they literally begged me to release it as a single. Begged me. And I said, no, okay. Just try the one station. Okay. And then here you go. Well, it's not testing well. And you're like, no shit. Because it's not one of those songs.
It's brutal.
Yeah. And it's a good song.
Brutal.
It's a good song. So then now every time I play the song, I don't hear the song and the lyric. I hear the guy telling me the intro's too long. You know what I mean? Do
you do that? Is that your personality? That instead of hearing all the wonderful things, you kind of zero in on the critiques or the negative?
I did. Not so much anymore.
Okay.
I had to, I was telling a friend yesterday, somebody was really complimenting me about something. And they said, they were at a dinner or something, and somebody said something really nice, genuinely nice. They said, did you hear that thing that person said? And I go, yeah, I heard it. And then they went on about it, and I said, so stop. I said, I heard it, but it didn't go in. And they said, why is that? And I said, because I had to learn years ago that a compliment is the same as a piece of criticism. In essence, the pact I made with myself is, if I'm not going to listen to criticism, I can't listen to compliment.
Mm-hmm.
I can't like go, I don't want to hear what you have to say. Don't bother me. Oh, you love me? Oh, tell me more.
Yeah, tell me more. Right.
Because it's its own form of addiction, right? So I had to just learn to trust myself. And even that was a process, but now I'm in a good place. So, hence you had all these people around me at the time, and some of them, bad idea, don't do 33 songs, career suicide. Yeah, I've heard that one before.
Yeah.
Don't do it, bad, 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 bad. Or there's some really good singles on this record. Does it have to be 33 songs? Why don't we? I'm like, it's a fucking rock opera.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, it's a kind of a joke. It's the Smashing Pumpkins. Have fun. If you want to work singles, great, but it's 33 songs. Can we do this other thing and the thing? And you're like,
it's brutal.
That's the business.
But you've gotten good about tuning it out. That's like a skill you had to work on.
I'm going to say this to you as a true Earth mama. It's family.
Mm-hmm.
It's family. Nothing makes me happier in this world that my kids don't give a shit who I am in the world.
Oh, yeah.
I mean that from the bottom of my heart if I have one left. When my kids just look at me and say, Dad, where's the Nintendo Switch? Tell you a quick story.
Do they listen to your music at all or no?
They do.
They do, okay.
Yeah, they love Bullet with Butterfly Wings. They love Everlasting Gaze because they love the video because Dad's all weird.
Oh, that's cool.
And they love We Only Come Out at Night.
Oh, I love it.
They sit in the back and sing the song, right? And I'm like, this is surreal because they have the voice, even though it's the little version of the voice, but there's the Corgan. So,
and I love that you've been doing that live, by the way. That makes me very happy.
Yeah. But that's how they got into the song. They heard me do it live. And they, because they're kids, 7 and 4, they connected with the lyric. We only come out at night. It makes sense to them in sort of a basic way, right?
They could sing along with it easily.
I'll tell you another quick story. So we were playing the United Center in Chicago, sold out show, 14,000 people, beautiful night. Everything's great. At some point during the show, Chloe walked out with the kids and they sat like in front of the barrier. So, here's the crowd, the barricade. And then they're sitting there. And I can see my son and he's watching me. He's like this. And he's got a zero tracksuit on. By the way, I had one custom made in red. He's the only one in the world. So he's got his little zero tracksuit. He's got his little, the gun range, these ones.
Of course, yeah.
And he's like this. And I saw him afterwards and I said, did you not enjoy the show? And he said, no, I like the show. I said, are you not proud of Daddy? What happened? He says, oh, no, I'm really proud of you. Aww. I said, but you made this face. I said, what was going on? I said, it makes me nervous to have all those people staring at you.
Oh, that's really beautiful and sweet.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so my way of translating it, I could be wrong, but my way of translating is he's not sure how he fits into that equation.
Yeah.
Because that's what he should be worried about, right?
Yeah.
Do I lose Dad somehow with all these people? And I'm like, no, you're number one.
Yes.
And she's number 1, 2.
Yeah.
Not 1, 2. They're one and
also,
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. You understand? You guys are the most important thing in Daddy's world. Like, everything else isn't even close. And they're like, where's the Nintendo Switch?
I love that they come with you to everything. It's become your family's lifestyle, that you all just go together.
I was raised the same way. My father, my enduring memories of going to like horrible smelling bars at 4 p.m. Now, imagine what bars were like back in the day.
With the smoking
like the
inside.
Smoke and the beer.
God.
And it was like, whoa, what is this? And the puke. And I'd be there, at 12 years old, watching Dad get high and do sound check at the club he was playing at. And then he'd drive me home and get ready and get dressed and go back to the gig. That was my life with my father. So what I took from that was, because, and I'm, Chloe had the baby, obviously, but we had our first child when I was 48. I had no parenting skills, so I had to kind of think it through, like, well, what kind of parent do I want to be? And I thought that's the one thing my dad got right, was by including me, it made me appreciate the complexity of his world. And it allowed me to get to know his friends, his bandmates as people, not just like the guy on bass.
Mm-hmm.
Like I got to know Louis on bass. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I was invited into a very particular club. And just like my son does now, like Augustus has personal relationships with everybody in the Pumpkins.
Oh, that's wonderful.
He has no problem walking out my door and going to Katie Cole's dressing room and having a conversation with Katie Cole or Jack Bates. He feels like to him, they're peers. They're not dad's band.
Right.
And we're this and you're that. Everybody's the same. So I think that's beautiful.
That is beautiful. And I love the relationship with you and Chloe as well. I feel like you guys have always supported each other's, well, one, you have two beautiful children together, but you've always supported each other's passions, and she's at every show, and you have Madame Zuzu's together.
And her fashion company. Which is called Maison Atia. And then, of course, there's even the sacrifice of the NWA, where I have to write my wrestling company, where I have to go in 5 days in the middle of America.
Yes.
And do something completely different away from the family. And now, because now they're a little older, now they come to wrestling shows too. So they know all the wrestlers.
That's incredible. That is awesome.
When you see your daughter talking to the 400-pound guy.
That's wild.
It's wild.
Yeah, that is wild.
But a friend of mine who wrestles and is one of the most decorated WWE female wrestlers, Natty Neidhart, who wrestles as Natalia. Her grandfather is Stu Hart, is one of the all-time legends of wrestling, Canadian. She would literally go to dinner at Grandpa and Grandpa's house and have dinner with Andre the Giant.
Oh my God.
Like it wasn't unusual to come over for Sunday dinner, and it would be Andre the Giant and the touring midget wrestlers that were coming through town, and some aging wrestler, and they're talking about the old days. And by the way, there used to be a wrestling bear. Do you know about the wrestling bear?
No, I don't.
There was a guy who had a wrestling bear, and the bear would travel around. And she said at one point the wrestling bear was in Canada working for her grandfather, the bear, obviously, but the guy, the trainer, and the bear was living under the porch. So they're playing under the porch with the wrestling bear, and then they go upstairs and have lunch with Andre the Giant.
That wins. I feel like that wins.
And she said, when I was a kid, that was just the world I lived in. And now I look back and I'm like, oh my God, I was having.
Doesn't everyone have a bear under the porch?
And Andre the Giant in the living room,
That's so
Yeah, it's cool, right?
That is amazing. That's amazing. You and Chloe are engaged. Congratulations.
I said no 400 times.
So what changed? And is there a wedding plan?
There is a wedding plan. It's not fair to call her Bridezilla, but she's in the neighborhood. Goth Bridezilla. Yeah, I don't know. I think I just reached a point. It's the singular journey that I've been on, and you have a lovely partner as well. You kind of go on this journey, and it's like when you meet someone, let's call it the right person. That's not the end of the journey. That's the beginning of this totally different journey. And what's always happened with us is somehow the way we are, and we're totally different people, we've just gotten closer and closer and closer. So this just seemed to be the next obvious thing in that journey. Not marry to seal the deal, but marry because it's the inevitability of the journey that we've been on, which is very slow, too slow for her. But for me, it was right. Now, to her credit, I did say in the beginning, and I was using it as a way to kind of blow her off, if we ever have 2 kids, no kids at the time, I'll marry you then. So then we had 2 kids, and she was like, and I was like, still not feeling it. So that went on for a good 4 years. And then when it was her birthday, I was like, okay, today's the day. And then I spent the whole day like.
You still weren't sure.
I'm Pisces, we got to work both sides of the room. And but it was weird because the minute I sort of said, okay, I'm ready, like everything's gotten better.
Oh, that's
everything.
Great.
Our life, our family life, our children's happiness, not because it was about us. It's just something about commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think promoting the band, same thing with the band. I think what makes great music in a band is you have to have that level of commitment. And let's go back to ATUM real quick.
Yeah.
I think where they were wise to not want to do ATUM at the beginning was you weren't
there yet.
Fused back together.
Yeah.
Where you can kind of, you know what I mean? 33 songs, a lot of music.
Yes.
And I've tested them plenty through the years. That's a lot to ask of guys in their 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Got a lot of other stuff to do. That's a lot of commitment. So at least I felt confident, like, okay, we can hang. Because look, it's a beautiful day. People tend to like the record at the moment. What if this was a disaster? Right? What if this was a disaster and we're getting horrible reviews and everybody hates the record and they're all on me again? Okay, that band still has to be able to hang. And they've done it in the past and they'll do it again.
But your band has always been sort of defined by risk. You have always
That's my fault, really.
You've always taken risks.
Yes, not always wisely so. There's something pathological about it. The credit that the band deserves, and that includes the original 3 plus me, is that they were always supportive of the risk, no matter how insane it was. So I always got to give that credit. But the problem of it all is always mine. Because I'm just like, down we go. I can't explain it, and I've tried to think it through. I'm not the guy who can just go back to Bowie. I'm just not that guy. You know what I mean? I don't know. I just can't do it that way. Just not wired that way.
You've never repeated yourself.
I have, but even when I've repeated myself, I'll put it this way. I'm going to say it like it's really lame because it's just an easier way to tell a story. You're sitting in a studio one day and you're like, they're all over me to make Siamese Dream 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm not feeling particularly strong today. I'm going to give it to them. Here you go. Here's another, something. It just doesn't work. Even if you're like, take it all.
Yeah.
I'm ready to sell out. I'm tired. It just doesn't work.
You're also not the same person.
But think about it this way, a slightly different angle. The band that made Siamese Dream, we were totally like this. Zzz, Nirvana, Pearl Jam. They're on, Eddie's and Kurt are on the cover of Time, MTV. Every time I turned around, Kurt and Courtney, my former girlfriend, it was like, it was intense, and it was an intense time. It's like making a diamond, the pressure, the moment,
right.
That's why I always love that song. I don't know the title. It's the famous Eminem song, Lose Yourself.
Oh, you Lose Yourself.
Is it 8 Mile? It's from 8 Mile.
8 Mile.
Is it called Lose Yourself?
Lose Yourself, yeah.
I mean, what a perfect song about the hustle.
Yes.
And if you think about it, that song on some level, and I don't want to put words in his mouth because he doesn't need me to do that, but my sense of it was he recognized the moment and he owned it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here. It's my time. And that song makes me feel that way every time I hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the game. So the guy that made that, like under all that pressure and duress, and the record label were breathing down my neck, and Butch Vig trying to get another quadruple platinum album out of a bunch of motley fools. The guy sitting there 20 years later like, yeah, I guess I'll give you a Siamese Dream song. You're not even in the same zip code. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
I can do it. And I like to taunt fans with the idea, like, I can make them Siamese Dream 2.0. I could really do it. No problem. I'm the guy who did it. I have the blueprint up here. I know exactly how I did it. In fact, I still have the same guitar pedals. I can do it. But that's not the spirit of it. It's like saying, it's like trying to have a love relationship, but paint by numbers. Can you imagine having your relationship with your partner like, okay, it says on the next page of the book, this is where we go on the rom-com date. And we drink pink champagne, and then
it's ridiculous.
And then afterwards we hold hands and we listen to a Lana Del Rey song. And then you stare deeply in my eyes and I'll tell you how much I love you. Can we do that? Are we on script?
I feel like it's always a timing thing too. Like there was like a certain moment in time that can't be recreated. I mean, what was it like?
You're getting more into quantum physics than
right.
That's
true.
To me, that's a quantum thing.
it was like you're describing that time where you kind of felt that pressure. So what year are we talking now? This is like post-Gish?
92 was 92 was probably the worst year of my life.
Really? Because the pressure?
I shouldn't say that because there's other years that are probably worse. But in terms of like the timeline that most people recognize, 92 was that worst year because I got a major label contract and suddenly I got to learn how to write pop songs for an emerging format in alternative radio, and MTV wants to play the video. And you're like, wait, a year ago, I couldn't even get arrested. I'm making $12,000 a year at a record store. And now you want me to do all this stuff that I don't even know how to do. And oh, by the way, if I don't do it, you're going to cast me out of your little kingdom of funny mustaches. And I got to go back to what? Being a nobody for the rest of my life and have to hear about how I blew it. Man, this is, and I was suicidal and the drugs and all of it. And the band was on its own version of off the rails. I mean, there was James and Darcy they were a couple at the time and they were having their own issues and Jimmy was off the rails over here. I mean, it was a crazy time. Butch Viggs talked about it very publicly. The band broke up at one point during the making of the record. Not broke up, Darcy tried to quit. It's actually Butch Vig who talked her back into the band during the making of the record.
Butch was like the glue.
Butch was the adult. Butch was the adult.
Right.
Butch was the guy wearing the vest, looking very professorial. Yeah, I mean, it's that Eminem song.
Yeah.
You got to go in and you got to go hard. So you cannot live life right that way, and you can't make rock and roll for sure that way.
You were in an interesting position because when everyone thinks of that time, you think Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, pretty much. All knowing each other, all friends in the same community and area. And you guys were such an important band for popularizing alternative rock in the mainstream. But you were almost on your own island because you were from Chicago. You weren't part of that whole grunge movement, but still equally important for alternative rock. What were your thoughts about Kurt, Nirvana? Were you friends with them? Were you fans of them? Were you hating on it? Like, what was your opinion of them at the time?
I thought Kurt was amazing. I mean, he was so talented. You were just like jealous of the talent. You're like, who gets that much talent in one wee body? And I was talking to somebody today about seeing when they came through town on Bleach, Cabaret Metro, somewhere 1990, maybe it was 89 even. And 500 people in the crowd, not even sold out. And the minute he opened his mouth, you're like, well, I can't sing like that. Jeez, that's that voice, which everybody knows. Incredible, just incredible. And you knew he could write songs. And he seemed to be cluing into the vibe of the times, that kind of disassociative ADD, onomatopoeia. Even if you look like the Teen Spirit lyrics, it's a bit ADD, Ritalin kids. Like, he's a super smart guy. So he's dumbing it down kind of as a wink, but he's also targeting the thing he's after. Like, he's making a statement. No, I thought the band was fantastic. Obviously, Grohl, super talented. Chris Novoselic, I thought, was a great bass player. I loved what he played. The problem was, and it wasn't a musical problem, because we played very differently and we were different bands. And we only did the one gig with Nirvana, Bullet La Volta, Smashing Pumpkins, Nirvana, somewhere in Boston, 91, 92. Not even sold out. 700 people, 800 people. There was a playoff game across the street, so everybody was at the playoff game. And, there's some future rock stars on stage. And such different bands, like after different things. I'm a little bit more meta. Kurt was a little bit more kind of in your grill about like what really matters. Like life. The problem was his wife or future wife was my ex-girlfriend. And that created an immediate rift. Mm-hmm. So add that with the fact that he's smart enough to understand that my band is probably one of the only bands that has any chance of even challenging his kingship. And that stuff does matter when you get down in the trenches of like, who's playing where on the bill and who's getting paid what. And, even if you look at Kurt's, last will and testament and the letter that he left, he talks about it's better to burn out and fade away. Mm-hmm. We were all very affected by what the business was doing to us. I don't want to say that's why he took his own life, but he chose to talk about it in his last words on Earth. It almost did my head in. So when you add the kind of the weird mixture of you're playing for different teams, and oh, by the way, the one thing we do share is a point of contention. That was difficult to navigate. The nice thing, and I've rarely talked about it, and I probably only talk about it with you, is towards the end of his life, obviously I had no idea he was going to go. We kind of made this weird peace where it seemed whatever that was seemed to go away, and it was a very nice and friendly. I'm not saying we sat there and talked about the moon and the stars, but it went from I'm not sure I like you, and I know you definitely don't like me, to like, how you doing? Is everything cool? Yeah, we're good. Talk about the baby. You know, it was, we reached that point where it was like a professional.
It was cordial.
Yes. And, you know, there were even times where she'd want me to call the house to talk to her about something. And of course, Kurt would pick up the phone and we'd have a couple minute, like, how you doing? You good? Yeah, it's all good. You know, like, I'm not saying we were BFF. I would never say that because I've seen plenty of other people do that weren't BFF. And I know the inside story more than most people know. But we got to that point, and I've said it a few times. The day I think I was in like Baton Rouge, Louisiana or something. We were playing someplace that night, and the phone rang at, you know, whenever it happened. And it was my manager at the time, and he said, Kurt's dead. And I wept. I wept. And I'm not a crier. I wept openly because you measure yourself against the best. That's what you should do if you really want to know life, and you really want to. I played sports as a kid. It's like winning doesn't mean anything if you're not playing the best. I wanted to fight the best. I don't mean fight like this. Just like, you got a song, I got a song. You do that really well. Yeah, well, we do this other thing really well that you can't do. It's that's the positive side of competition. We were all competing for the same spot, number one, right? And don't forget, even on that, what was the bill that never happened? It was supposed to be for Lollapalooza. It was going to be Nirvana, Pumpkins, Beastie Boys.
Wow.
And they dropped out. So then we slotted down and became the headliner. But just look at that bill.
Yeah.
And look, it's easy to play, Monday morning quarterback. And it was the most successful Lollapalooza, at least the traveling version,
right,
that year without them. So imagine what would have been with them. And I would have welcomed the challenge every night to try to blow them off the stage. And I know he would have tried to blow me off the stage every night. But we were friendly enough that it wouldn't have been dickish.
Right.
But that's what you should do. So we had that, like, okay, you're pretty good at what you do. And, and as you know, with the Pumpkins, we're so asymmetrical that we're not comparable in the sense of like, he writes a really good teen anthem and I write a really good teen anthem. Because the Pumpkins were just as likely to play like a 27-minute jam,
right?
About the end of the world.
Yeah.
So we're coming at you from a lot of different
angles. Yeah.
But no, back to the original spirit of your question. Amazing, amazing band, amazing artist. And it's a shame we don't have 800 more songs from him because they all would have been good because he didn't write bad songs. And by the way, he writes really great songs and then he's got that voice.
Yes.
And that vision.
And he was also gorgeous. Like, it was just like a weird planets aligning.
No, I used to say to Courtney, it's like he's the quarterback, right?
Right.
Like, I remember being at my locker and watching the quarterback walk by, and all the girls would look at the quarterback as he walked by. That was Kurt. And by the way, and I was in plenty of social situations, so even whether we were unfriendly and then became friendly, I watched it no matter where I was on the arc. Wherever he went, all the girls would go. And the guys would like, kind of like...
They adjust themselves.
No, they try to turn into Kurt somehow.
Yeah.
Like suddenly they started like standing like him and... Yeah. I don't know. And he's one of one. There's no copying Kurt.
Thank you for sharing all of that. Yeah, that is pretty powerful.
Listen, I in a selfish way, I love extolling the virtue of great artists. We talked about David, and now we're talking about Kurt. I talk about Kurt for an hour. He was amazing. He was amazing. He changed the world. He made it possible so that we could sell a gazillion records like they did. You can't, like, that's what I mean about respect. You have to give that respect. You have to say, that guy got it done. And there were plenty of bands before them that could have gotten it done. Jane's among them.
Yes.
And there were certainly signs of life. But he kicked that door open and it stayed open. It wasn't like the 1 year and then it closed. He changed it all. I mean, and it's still. And you go to right there. And the only other moment you can point to is like Dylan, as far as rock to me, Dylan in what, 63?
Right.
Where suddenly the Beatles now they're trying to write like Bob Dylan. And all, like, so Dylan around 63, 64, and Kurt in 90, 91. For me, that's the two defining moments of the music that I understand.
Smells Like Teen Spirit was the song for me. And Elvis.
Can't leave out.
Right.
But to me, it's like saying, oh, and there's the sun.
Right. Exactly.
Let's not forget about the sun.
Yeah, I mean, that's literally.
Without the sun, we'd all be dead.
Right. That's true.
Elvis is the progenitor. So Elvis, Dylan,
Kurt, you're absolutely right.
I all my issues aside, all my ego aside, you got to call that. I wish I would go, and then there's me. But I don't put myself in that. You understand?
Well, Kurt was sort of the gateway drug. And then I learned about everyone else. But Nirvana was the eye opener for me when I fell in love with everything after that.
Did you see shows in that time?
I was too young.
Oh.
I know, it's traumatizing.
I know you're just 22, so it's
exactly.
I'm really stretching there.
Right. I was in utero. Sorry, I had to.
I'll tell you a quick. You want one more quick Nirvana
I love
thing?
all of them.
We were playing in Japan, and I don't know if Hole was playing, but Nirvana was definitely on a tour. And so we did some thing, or we were doing something, and then we found out Nirvana was in town. You know, we knew they were in Japan, but we found out they were in the town that we were in. I think it was Tokyo. And if we wanted, they were playing 2,400, small. And I mean, back then, it's a little different now. Japanese crowd's completely quiet. You know, song finishes. It ain't like Nirvana in Seattle or something.
Right.
So we go to the show, and this is a funny memory. They started, my memory is they started playing the show with Teen Spirit, which at that point was a massive worldwide hit. But what Kurt did is he started playing Teen Spirit and he started singing More Than a Feeling by Boston.
By Boston. Yes.
And then they kicked into Teen Spirit. But that's how they started the show. The show was great. And, but what was weird is at that point they were super massive, and it's obvious, like they're huge. Now they're huge. It's not like I'd seen them before when they were still on their way up. Now they're huge. But the audience hadn't caught up to it. So it was this contrast of a band that was bigger than the audience at the moment. And they didn't have the feedback loop of the audience. So they played really well, but it was that sort of weird thing that can happen in Japan where the band was sort of a bit out of sync with the audience. But we were like, holy shit, they sound amazing. And they're obviously having a moment. And then we went back to say hi, and I was talking to Kurt, just talking a bit about the show. And because it's Japan, there's no security. And this guy just wanders backstage like an American serviceman or something. And he comes up and he's like, Kurt, Kurt. And I just saw, and Kurt's eyes get really big and he looks at me like, save me.
Yes, he was horrified.
He's like, Kurt, I just got to tell you that Teen Spirit song. And Kurt's just, oh my God. And you're like, here we are. You're that guy. There's no security. The guys wandered back and it was all right there. And then when we went out, you know, you go outside and there's 400 fans standing outside. It ain't 40. You know
right.
What I mean? There it is. Even in Japan,
it was a new
where it's
day.
a bit,
yeah.
Oh, yeah. You know you're in a different ballpark when you see that. And they certainly were. And you could see them kind of like, whoa. Because that's what happens when you're in that spot. And we were in that spot eventually where you're just like, whoa, this is wild.
Does it get to a point where you're like, I wanted this and now I'm not sure if I want this? Or if you're ever just scared? I always want this.
No,
yeah.
It's the classic Frankenstein or Promethean fire. You've created it. Now you got to deal with the monster that you've created. Right. It's more about, it would be better if it was like this.
Mm-hmm.
I remember playing Lollapalooza in 94 and looking out at people that only a couple years ago were stopping their car as I stood for a bus and would call me every name in the book, which I can't repeat on the show because it would get both of us canceled.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I see.
So now I'm looking at that same guy, literally, and he's like,
Right.
Today. And you're like, this is wild.
Yeah.
How am I this guy's thing?
Yeah.
Because I'm the enemy, or at least in my mind, he's the enemy. And, that thing, that erases that. And you're like, okay, this is weird. And I remember going after Kim Gordon at the time, not my best friend in the world, because she was very critical of those people.
Mm-hmm.
And my thing was like, yeah, I get what you're doing, this kind of New York snob thing. Like, it's no longer just the cool kids anymore. Even though that guy hated me or would hate me again or whatever, or would throw me in a ditch the minute I didn't write songs he liked. I don't like looking down your nose at people if they're coming. And I've had my issues, but back to the respect thing. It's like rock and roll at its best. And that's why I think Elvis is probably the supreme artist of the 20th century is. His music invited everybody in, and he didn't have a judgmental bone in his body. And if he did, we didn't hear about it, and people have written plenty of books.
Right.
He went way out of his way to make everybody feel that they were part of what he was doing. I think that, to me, is the true spirit of rock and roll. So when you get into the snobby stuff, and not a fan.
I'm with you, because if you think about rock and roll has always been a fusion of and a celebration of so many different subgenres and cultures. It's always been a mashup, an amalgamation. So to all of a sudden become a purist, it's almost like it doesn't make sense.
Imagine being Chuck Berry in 1958 or Howlin' Wolf, these great, African-American artists, and watching white artists cop their trip, be more successful, and have to navigate all that. Okay, to me, that's the real deal.
Right.
So if you want to sit there 40 years later and kind of pull down your NYU glasses and, I don't appreciate the proletariat coming to my noise rock show. It's just so, ugh.
No.
If people, if the early geniuses of rock and roll, who like a James Brown, if they were able to navigate not only the politic, but the social politic and the racism and the bigotry, and go on to not only create an audience that was inclusive of everybody, but change the game by the very nature of their talent.
Forever.
It's a weird kind of version of a flip to turn into, yeah, but I don't want you here.
Right.
That I've been able not to do.
If they can be inclusive, we should all be inclusive.
I've quibbled at times why they're there. Like I like to dismissessively refer to the Siamese Dream fans as Siamese zombies.
Right.
Because it's like the undead. Please play Rocket. It's like
today.
Yeah, and they talk to me like I didn't write those songs. It's like, can you talk to the guy who wrote Rocket? Because my life would be complete if you would play Soma.
Right.
And then you cue the shot of the guy, ripping flesh out.
No, absolutely. You and I share a passion for like the respect of the past, present, and future, and supporting artists whose voice comes from the heart, an authentic voice. And I love your podcast.
Podcast.
I love your podcast. I love your podcast. 33.
Interesting Freudian slip there. H. Have you ever heard of reverse speech? You know about reverse speech? I like to reverse speech that. Like your voice in reverse be like, his podcast isn't very good.
It's shit.
Podcast.
I love your podcast, 33 with William Patrick Corgan. And you had two guests on your show in particular, which have also been two guests on my show. And it's YUNGBLUD and Willow. Two very special young artists, and you and I both obviously feel the same about them.
Yeah.
What is it about those two artists that you wanted to make sure they were part of your show?
Well, it starts from the fact that I think that knowing that there's some appreciation in my work, you at least start with a common understanding, right? And I'm not saying I had them on my show because they're fans. I'm saying is at least when I talk, they can understand where I'm coming from.
Right.
I'm not the guy talking and they're like, don't really know what you do, but I heard from my friend you're good. So you start there and that you have a sense of common dialogue. And my sense of them as artists, how can I put it? I feel like we're in the same lineage, right? Like, and I would put them in the same lineage as Elton John, or I don't know. There's so many that would easily, my mind explodes with like so many different things because like when I think of Youngblood, I think Elton John, right? Because he's got one of those voices where it's like, or Rod Stewart, where now he's doing whatever he's doing, post pop punk, whatever. But 20 years from now, that guy could be, or 10 years from now, he could be writing Yellow Brick Road.
Yeah.
His version. With her, I think it's really interesting because, look, you start with the fact everybody knows the family name. Okay. Like, it's almost like, okay, let's set that aside because that's its own thing to navigate. I think what's interesting is she's decided to voice who she is through the guitar, not exclusively, but that choice told me something about her, which is, yeah, I get it. You know who my parents are. Yeah, I get it. We're living in this different time and you're going to project whatever you want to project on me because of who you think I am. But my weapon of choice is the guitar. And I'm going to make a bunch of different statements, not because I want to make statements, because I want to express who I am. So I can kind of push you back off the line to at least make you stop and think before you jump into all that other stuff. You're going to stop and think about, wait, this is their own person, has their own things to say. It's a really weird analogy, Lee, but I always like to say Cher is one of the greatest actresses I've ever seen because I was watching a movie once with Cher and I forgot it was Cher.
Great point.
So I think with Willow, and I'm not saying she wakes up thinking this is my sense from the outside, is she's doing a good job of making you forget who her parents are. And that's no disrespect to her parents, both very accomplished. But if she's going to get her own thing across, she's got to kind of back you up off the line. And I think it's really cool. Like I did, she's chosen the guitar as that weapon because it has a way of backing people off the line in a particular way. And the fact that she comes at it with a particular aggression, a different generational set of ideas, where almost everybody else in that situation, and of course she had her younger version of it, would be like, okay, right, here's the super pop producer, it's all lined up, and here's the auto-tune, okay, go. And all you got to do is do the rest, and, everything will line up. And she was like, nah, I don't want all that. Now that's my sense of it. She
stepped away from it, yeah.
That's my sense of it, so I don't want to project on it because I think you have to be careful of that because you can tend to make a lot of assumptions about young artists. Youngblood, I can already tell where he's going. And if I'm right, you'll be talking about him for the next 30, 40, 50 years.
Yes.
Like we are talking about Rod Stewart or something.
I feel the exact same way.
With her, she's into a totally different trip because she's got the kind of mind where she might change the game completely.
Mm-hmm.
She's just starting with this. But by the time she's done, she might not just be a movie star and a rock star. She might have done something that we haven't even invented yet. That's the power where and when she puts those pieces together, then the family, then the assumptions, they become additive, not, I want to, it's like, how can I put this? I want to say this very sensibly because I want to respect the privacy part. When I was prepared to interview Willow, I knew exactly what I wanted to talk about, and it was only about music. And then somebody chimed in from her world, and I understand why. And they were like, we'd appreciate it if you didn't talk about, let's just call it an X. And I was like, I know why you're asking. I'm not even there, but I understand why they have to do that because invariably somebody's going to sit there and say, it's really cool what you're doing. But by the way, let's talk about, that's why she's got to back people up.
Yes.
And we went through it in our own way. 92, you put out your stuff. So you guys are from Seattle, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you guys feel about Nirvana?
Mm-hmm.
Not now, 92. It's like, back up, motherfucker. We're the Smashing Pumpkins. We're from Chicago. We're going to do our own thing. So to have all that pressure, and my friend Lisa Marie Presley, she went through it. Of course, Francis has gone through it. Cobain has gone through it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I really get it. And I really respect her for that because that shows real heart and ambition. Those are two things that if you put those together, that one's unstoppable.
It is unstoppable. And I'll never forget seeing the Pumpkins and seeing her come on stage. I mean, the first thing I noticed, and she and I talked about this when she was on the show, that there was no mic for her. I'm like, okay, so she's coming on as a guitarist. And that was so cool.
We had a little bit of an exchange, and she was kind of like, kind of what do you want me to do or something? And I said, you come on and play with the band. You're in the band for one song. And that's just the way we roll. Like, we're inviting you to join the Smashing Pumpkins for one song.
Yeah. And
she was like, oh, cool.
She's awesome.
As opposed to, hey, everybody.
Right. She's the real deal. Right. She's the real deal.
And what was cool, and I've seen it happen a few times, Chino Moreno it happened to, and it's happened to me like when I played with New Order and suddenly I'm playing with Joy Division. You can see the kind of recognition like, oh, it's a little different up here when you got Jimmy.
Yes.
And you feel that. And they kind of do this thing like, oh, fuck, this is interesting.
The magnitude of it.
Because on stage, we're a little bit more visceral.
Yes.
And you could see people kind of go, all right, interesting. So I was paying close attention because I was waiting for the kind of the recognition. And once she kind of relaxed and leaned in, and she was like, I'm just up here to rock.
Yeah.
I'm not up here as Willow Smith.
Yes.
I'm up here to rock with this band.
She was so honored, and she worked. She really practiced. She was nervous.
She did great.
She's awesome.
She did great. Because put it this way, that space, the Pumpkin space, we are not, hey, are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
What can you need a latte?
Right.
We're like,
there's your mark.
You're kind of over here. I'm kind of over here. Go. There's no hand holding in the Pumpkins.
Yeah.
If you think about it, it's our way of showing respect.
Of course.
You belong up here with us. You got this. Hit it.
Yeah. A really cool conversation you had with YUNGBLUD, which I thought was so interesting, was, he was talking about, he has so many influences. He loves The Cure, and he loves the Sex Pistols, and he loves Green Day, and he loves Gaga, and he's got so many influences. And he has this ability on one album to sort of, one song is one vibe, another song's a different genre. And you were saying how in the 90s, like, you would not have been able to do that because it would have come across as inauthentic because you weren't one, because the purists of the 90s, you have to be one thing, and that's the only way to come across as authentic, whereas he now has this freedom to sort of wear all of his influences on his sleeves.
The way they did it in the 90s was irony. Like, now I'm doing my French trip.
Right.
Now I'm a DJ. And I get it. It was kind of a cultural concern. The Beasties, in their own way, probably started it, where it was like, well, why are you guys suddenly sound different? Well, we're just having a laugh. But behind the scenes, people had obviously worked very hard to find variance in their game. Now that kid's built for this world that's coming, because if you can sing like he can sing, and you have access to what he has access to, and what I mean by that is resources. There's who wouldn't want to write with that kid, who wouldn't want to see where he's going. He's in that rare list of people like a Joe Cocker or a Rod Stewart or Elton John, where the singer is the song. I'm not that type of singer. I have to write a song for this voice. That kid can sing the phone book. So it'll be very interesting because guys like that or girls like that, if they get it right, they ascend to this very rare place. It's hard to explain because it's like, I just see it differently. It's like, wow, who gave you all that? Like Kurt, right?
Right.
Kurt could have been that guy, but he wasn't. But you listen to that voice and you're like, I hear so much in this voice, and he's singing, take me out to the ball game or something, right?
He's also such a visionary. So he's the real true artist. He's pretty impressive.
As you know, sometimes you meet people while you're interviewing them. He and I had never met. So there we are, press record, you're doing the podcast. And as the more I talked to him, I was like, oh, this kid can hang this kid could be in the Pumpkins, like no problem.
Yeah.
Like he ain't afraid. He ain't touchy. He ain't like sensitive. He doesn't need your validation every 5 seconds. This kid is like,
he's special.
He's, as we would say, he's a baller, right? He can dunk. And I have total faith in that kid. I mean, he is the real deal.
He gives me hope. He makes me feel very optimistic about the future. But we're in a good place. Music's in a good place. It's just, rock and alternative is just underground. It's just not, the 90s were unique. The counterculture was mainstream.
Do you want my theory?
Yes.
My current working theory is that I think rock is at its best when it gets shoved out of the mainstream. Because, and there was a similar complaint in country music when country crossed over in the 60s. What happens is, or here's one that everybody would remember. You had bands like Chicago and REO Speedwagon, MTV. They're rock bands. They're touring rock bands. All of a sudden, somebody has a hit with a ballad, and now everybody's got the DX7 out. I mean, it felt like, and I love Chicago, by the way, being from Chicago, but Chicago had like 80 of those songs.
Yes, they did.
You're my inspiration. I love you.
Hard habit to break.
And I remember watching MTV about 87 wanting to commit suicide. I was like, I can't do this.
Right.
Like, what happened to, Saturday in the park? I was like, where are we?
Yeah.
So let's use my time. Suddenly you're on MTV, and here come the third and fourth generation bands doing schmaltzy versions of Nirvana, and they're getting plays, and now somebody's doing the power ballad or hair metal, and suddenly there's all this schlock. The public gets tired of it and rejects it. So rock at some point goes, oh, you don't want us? Okay, we're just going to go back and party over here.
Yeah, exactly.
I call it going to ground.
Yeah.
Right? You go back to ground, and now the music's back in the clubs.
Yes.
Here's how I know. I've been hearing about rock coming back for 20 years. It's coming. Oh, check out this band. Just played in Mexico City in front of 30,000 people. All the young Mexican bands were big, loud guitar bands. And on the bill was Deaf Heaven and, and Jane's. Like, credible, but Peter Hook. And then all the local Mexican bands were like, oh my God. Like, this is really credible. Like, not just sounds like.
Yeah.
Went to Australia. Same exact thing. Amyl and the Sniffers. You're like,
oh, amazing. She's incredible.
Amy, wow.
Wow.
Real rock star. Okay, so you're like, okay, here it comes. It's coming.
Yes.
Now it might be 2 years, 4 years, but now I see it. Now it's going to happen. Because rock goes away, figures out its new thing. Get away from us. Okay? I love the pop people. I don't need to name their names. We see them at the Grammys and the Emmys and the Oscars and at the Met Ball, and they're all wearing funny things. Great. Enjoy. But there's going to come a time where that won't work because here comes a Willow or a YUNGBLUD or a Kurt Cobain. And not only are they going to shatter your game, you'll have no way to recover. And I hate to say it, good. Because I've met Janet Jackson a few times. The nicest person you'd ever want to meet. So beautiful, so kind. 1989 Billy in the apartment above the Music Box there in Chicago. I hated Janet Jackson because she represented everything I hated. Producers and perfect songs and perfect videos. And we're down here in the stinky club, with the guy in the Motorhead shirt. And I got to figure this out. So by the time you get all that swirl of momentum, coming out of Seattle, coming out of Minneapolis, coming out of Chicago, coming out of the UK with My Bloody Valentine and all that.
Yes.
By the time you get there, you're like, get out of my way.
Right. Yeah.
And eventually, as has happened again and again and again, millions of kids go, I want the real thing.
That authenticity, that raw.
Can't fake it.
No, you can't. They bleed it. It's them. There's no separation.
No 18 producers is going to figure out that the out-of-tune guitar and the screeching vocal and the lyric about Mommy Take Me Home is the anthem.
Yes.
Not just another hit in a long line of hits about going to the club.
Yeah.
And that's the most beautiful, sacred moment in rock and roll is when some kid figures it out and goes, get the fuck out of my way. And that's how I felt.
Those are our people.
Luckily I had Kurt in front of me to do the heavy lifting first. Because I don't know if I would have, I didn't write that song. but I don't know if I could handle the pressure either.
Right.
I'll tell you a quick thing that you may not know. Test your trivium. Back in the day, because I was around with Butch when this was all happening. Back in the day, the Billboard album charts, number one wasn't who sold the most records that week. Did you know that?
No.
So when Nevermind was rolling, they were actually selling more records than other albums on the chart, and they weren't number one. They had some weird formula. It was record sales plus this, plus that, minus this. And
oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. It was
I didn't realize that.
It was all, as we say in wrestling, was all a work.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a way of controlling the charts.
I see.
So there were 2 or 3 weeks where Nirvana was the number one selling album. Nevermind was the number one selling album in the U.S., and they weren't number one.
They didn't get the credit for it.
Because they didn't want them to be number one.
Interesting. I did not know
And then
that.
it became like, you weren't stopping this train.
Right.
And from that moment on, and we were with Butch that night having an Italian dinner that he paid for on his new major label money. We were literally with Butch the night that Nevermind went to number one. And we literally, all 4 pumpkins, toasted him and said, welcome to the big leagues, buddy.
Oh, that's so special.
Yeah.
That's an incredible story. What about how a Siamese Dream is 30?
Well, I'm 32, so it's
exactly.
It's quite an accomplishment. You have young ones at home. It's quite an accomplishment. Think of your child, right? Siamese Dream it too. I mean,
now you
that's
said
such a cheesy dad joke, right? I just made
I'm all about the dad jokes. I'm with you. You've said in the past you would not do a Siamese Dream tour, but then you also said now that you've children, you're more sentimental, so maybe you'd potentially consider it.
I can't talk yet about it, but we're going to do something special for Siamese by the end of the year.
Okay.
We will mark the moment, yes. Siamese is a very important record. Important records, and I say this humbly, they're bigger than the band. Siamese Dream is a record that's bigger than the Smashing Pumpkins. It takes on its own. We're selling crazy amounts of T-shirts to teenagers with the cover.
I bet.
Why? You're wearing Iron Maiden, right?
Yeah.
I saw Iron Maiden. By the way, I saw Iron Maiden that week that album came out.
Really?
I think Bruce Dickinson's first show as the singer of Iron Maiden in the U.S. I'm pretty sure I was at that show.
Wow.
Can't be sure. I'd have to look at a calendar, but I'm pretty sure. So I'm listening to that album and I'm watching that band on stage in 82, 83. Okay. So it's hard to tell me as a fan that I wouldn't care about them going out and doing something to mark that album 40 years later.
Siamese Dream is in a league of its own. The artwork alone, everyone agrees it's a masterpiece start to finish. And
even Pitchfork.
It's objectively a great album. And there are people who love Smashing Pumpkins and only know that album. Like that's the album.
Yeah.
That's the album.
Oh no, I get the guy like, after Siamese, I just can't follow what you're into, bro. Sorry. And he shows me a Siamese tattoo. That's why I call them Siamese zombies.
That album, well, I'm excited to hear this because I was hoping you were going to say something about that. All right, let's try to get to deep cuts, which is just a lightning round.
Here we go. I'll try to be lightning-esque.
Name a song, album, or artist that changed your life.
Black Sabbath.
Which song is it?
Well, Sweet Leaf. My uncle had a stereo. And my grandmother somehow let me play her son's stereo. And Master Reality was the first album in the stack. I put it on and I heard Sweet Leaf and I was like, and I've been chasing that sound ever since. And I was 8 years old when I heard that. No joke.
That's impressive.
Ozzy's sound of his voice. Okay, you're talking about Siamese Dream. Okay, anybody know Siamese Dream? Ozzy's voice doubled. The guitars split into stereo. Big guitars. I'm doing Black Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing my poor imitation of Black Sabbath. I've been chasing that sound ever since.
I love that.
That is the thing for me.
Have you connected with Ozzy?
I mean, I've had don't forget, Sharon even managed the band at one point.
Oh, that's right.
And quit on the band and said she was quitting because I was making her sick.
Oh.
We're friends again now. Me and the Osbournes. Love Sharon and of course I love Ozzy. I don't know Ozzy as well as I know Sharon. And I know Tony better because I work with Tony on his solo record. But that's the best.
That's awesome. What was your first concert?
I saw Asia on the Heat is the Moment.
Heat of the Moment, yeah.
I don't remember the name of it. It might have been the name of the album. but that was the name of the
I
hit
think it was
single.
Heat of the Moment. That was a single.
And it was
for
cool because they were doing that thing like they were doing some Yes. Carl Palmer was in the band. So they did some Emerson, Lake and Palmer stuff. They did some Yes stuff. And then, of course, they played cuts from the Asia album. That was my very first. Oh, I actually have a good story. So maybe 7 years ago, we played the exact same venue I saw my first show in.
Oh, wow.
And I had one of the worst seats. It's an old opera house in Chicago. And it goes like, it's not a very deep theater. And then it goes steep up. So there's 5 tiers. So imagine being 5 stories up, almost looking straight down at the stage.
God.
It's kind of almost
uncomfortable.
So I told the story on stage that I saw Asia in this very venue. I can't remember the date, 1982. And I said I was sitting right there, and I made the people wave that were in my seats.
And it was Asia.
That would be amazing. Unfortunately, my life does not work as well as yours. But I pointed to them and I made them acknowledge me. So now they understand that I see them and they see me.
Yeah.
And I said, and I already had somebody standing by, and I said, there is somebody standing behind you ready to take you. I have 2 front row seats for you. And I brought them from the top.
Oh, that's the best.
Because that's what I wanted someone to do for me.
Oh, that's paying it forward. That's really sweet. I like that story. What is a song you wish you wrote?
Gosh, there's this Teenage Fan Club song I can't think of the title of. There's a million.
Yeah. It's a hard one.
I heard Dylan's Positively 4th Street. You've got a lot of nerve. Where he just does, it's like the ultimate put down song. Right. And I was like, oh my God, please. Yeah. I wish not only do I wish I could write a song like, not only do I wish I could write the song, I wish I could write a song like that.
Yeah.
I do not have that skill set. Amazing.
Well, most people do not. I mean, he's one of a kind.
Yeah, but I'm pretty good at my gig. And when I can't do something, it's very frustrating to me.
I think you're doing pretty well.
That's the mom in you. I just felt so supported. I feel like you just wrap me in like one of those snuggie, like the kid. You got to bind them. You just bound me in your love. Thank you.
I'm always here for you.
Thank you.
Do you have a favorite movie? Probably
Satyricon by Fellini. I don't know if you know that movie.
I don't know it.
It's pretty decadent, but it's pretty amazing.
Okay. I have homework.
If you watch it from the prism of modernity, it's set in like ancient Rome, but it's very decadent. And then you look at it as a sort of parable to modernity and how people end up sort of, because the actual text from Satyricon is one of the oldest written texts in the world, and they're not really sure even who wrote it. It's a farce. But Fellini turns into this like weird comment on modernity and kind of being gross. And I think probably it's even more poignant now today because everything's just so out of control on social media.
Ugh. All right, I have to watch that.
How are you feeling as a parent looking forward into social media land? I'm waiting on that one.
Yes, that's really upsetting me to even think about it. Ugh. Do you have a favorite meal or cuisine?
No, I'm boring.
You're plant-based, right?
I am now. Yeah, and I own a plant-based cafe called Madame Zuzu's.
What's your favorite meal from Madame Zuzu's then?
The meatball sub's pretty good. That's probably our biggest item. Chloe designed this incredible meatball sub. And, it's one of those classic things where people come in that are not vegan and they order that and they're like, I can't believe this.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I look forward to that.
Please.
If you were not a musician, what would you be?
History teacher. I used to say history teacher or psychologist, but I think psychology is kind of creeping me out as I get older.
Mm-hmm.
History teacher. I'd be the boring guy with the patches and
the elbow patches.
I'd have that thing.
The weird hairline.
Yeah, the hairline, but I'd have the ponytail.
Do you have a most prized possession?
No, but if there's a sort of rosebud in my life, it's probably the Gish guitar that came back after 27 years.
That's right. You were reunited.
Yes, it was amazing. This gentleman out of Nashville, somehow somebody contacted him and had some story about they found it, and it doesn't matter how it was stolen, and I think whoever had it knew it was stolen. And if they passed it off to somebody else and they pretended it wasn't stolen, doesn't matter. But the fact that it came back after 27 years is pretty remarkable.
Oh, that's really special.
Because I guess what I would say is like, it's the last, and the fact that it was stolen in 92, it's like, I don't know, let's pretend this is the guitar, right?
Yeah.
It's like you can literally hold an object in your hands and you can go, when this thing was with me, this happened. And when it left, got a lot crazier. It's like the last moment of innocence or something.
What is something your fans might be surprised to learn about you?
See, that's a tough one because I think at this point, my fans, like to call them the ones that care about me on a daily basis, they're pretty aware how annoying I am, but also what a nerd I am. I think to the general fan, anybody that was watching you that doesn't really know a ton about me, I think they would be surprised to know that most of the book on me in the world is based on characters that I played as I was doing what I was doing, and there's a lot of convoluted reasons why I did it. So to this day, people still think I'm the character that it's like basically being judged for the character you played in the movie, and you're like, I'm not that guy.
Right.
I really didn't kill, Al Pacino at the end of the movie.
Right.
But they're convinced that I did. So that's kind of a weird thing. But I think at this point, most of the fans, I call them hardcore fans, they're fully aware that guy.
Right. Are there words you live by?
Hope is not a course of action. I think that's one of my favorite quotes.
That's awesome.
Hope is not a course of action. Fake it till you make it is another good one.
Those are great. What do you hope your children learn from you?
Let there be rock.
Yes, let there be. Amen.
I get asked a lot, and you can understand why, how would you feel if your kids go into the music business? And what I always say is, I just want my kids to be happy. Mm-hmm. I think I used to argue with my father because he used to say to me, it's good you got abused as a child because it made you a better rock star, which is a really messed up thing to say. And I used to say, Daddy, if I wasn't beaten the way I was, maybe I would have been a great classical composer, or maybe I would have just been a history professor. No shame in that. I chose rock for a particular set of reasons, and I just happen to be good at it. But with my children, God willing, I just want them to be happy. So I think what I want them to take from me is that our Father, speaking in the third person, I guess, our Father, and you can imagine I'm 56 now. I have a 7 and 4-year-old. I have to often contemplate that probably at some point I'm going to go and I'm not going to be there for them. And they're going to have to navigate life without me. I want them to speak about me in a way that said, our Father lived a particular way, and we understand why he did that. And we understand that he was always trying to make it better, and he took what he made better and he gave that to us so that we don't have to go through what he went through. That would make me happy.
Oh, it's beautiful.
I almost made myself cry.
I know. I'm actually
here on the Alley show. We talk about rock and we get really sensitive. You're killing me.
Really, thank you. The fact that our conversation ended with us holding hands and in tears was just so meaningful to me. Wow. What a moment. It is now time for my sound advice, new music you need to know on the Allison Hagendorf Show playlist. Kicking it off this week with one of my favorite new songs from today's guest, Billy Corgan. This new Pumpkin song hooks you immediately with Billy's metal guitar riff, complemented by Jimmy Chamberlin's powerful drumming, all within the song's first 10 seconds. This has quickly become one of my favorite Smashing Pumpkins songs. Check out Empires. Next up is the first song from the new lineup of the band Fever 333. Frontman Jason Alon Butler is one of the best there is, and he is now joined by a new lineup featuring new drummer Thomas Pridgeon from the Mars Volta and Thundercat, viral bass sensation April K, and guitarist Brandon Davis. Turn this one up for your workouts. This is Fever 333 with Swing. Also, my sound advice is the latest from Jasmine Bean. Based in London and known as a pioneer for their approach to makeup and aesthetics, Bean has said, I create music and film that pushes the boundaries of beauty and societal standards. I am loving their latest song, which is produced by John Feldman, aka Feldy, and Travis Barker. Check out Jasmine Bean's Piggy. That's my sound advice this week. You can hear all of these plus more on the Allison Hagendorf Show playlist. The link to that is in the show notes and at AllisonHagendorf.com. As always, thank you so much for being part of the Allison Hagendorf Show. New episodes drop every Friday, so make sure you follow and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. You can find the show wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also watch the show on Instagram and YouTube. I would love to hear from you, so please like, comment, rate, review, whatever you're feeling, and reach out to me on socials at Allie Hagendorf. I would love to connect with you. Let me know who I should interview next and what new music I should feature on my sound advice. Thanks again. I'll see you next week. And remember, you're a rock star.